Here we are back again. I have finished doing the negative painting around my flower and the leaves. So you can see now how by painting the outside or the negative space, I have created the flower on the inside. I'm not done with the outside yet, but for now I'm going to let that dry, and while that's drying I can work on something else. Part of the nature of watercolor is that it's transparent, and you can use that to your advantage. Each layer is that you put down. The next layer that you put on top of it is influenced by the previous layer. So as you layer, you create more intensity of color, and you also create intensity of your value. Now the difference between the two, intensity of a color means it's more blue or it's more yellow. You know, it looks richer, deeper. Value is its lightness or its darkness. In watercolor, traditionally, white is the white of the paper. I don't have any white. I don't use white. There are exceptions to that rule. There's also no black on my palette. I like to mix to a dark color. So this will probably get much darker as we move along. But for the most part, the white parts of this flower are going to be the paper and the spots. I'm not going to do anything to create white. White will make your paints look chalky, so try to avoid that if possible. What I'm also going to do is I want to underpaint some things. I'm going to underpaint the leaves here. Make sure I don't get the petals and stuff in there. So there's leaves there, and I want to underpaint the little centerpiece there. And I'm going to do it all with yellow. If you look at the photograph, you'll see that there's a lot of yellow in the lighter parts. This is a part that confuses a lot of beginning students, is that they want to go straight to the finished color, which is this dark green. Well, where you want to start is at your lightest colors. And your lightest colors, there's some yellows in there, there's also some light blues in there, and those are where you start. Light greens. You don't start with the dark colors, you start with the light colors. Set that over there. So that's what I'm going to do at this point in time. First, I'm going to start with the yellow. I've already got yellow out on my palette. I'm just going to wet it. Now I use my paints, I let them dry out in between times. Other people will always put out fresh paint. Nothing in art is set in stone, no matter what anybody tells you. If you prefer to work a certain way, then that's the way you work. I like to work with dry paint because I hate throwing paint away. It's watercolor, you add water, it's back again. So here we go. Remember, watercolor will dry lighter. I'm not too concerned if I go out of the lines in this area because I'm going to add more dark to that, and the yellow is not dark enough right now to even worry about it. So, adding my yellow here. And I'm going to find down here in this leaf here is yellow. At least I see a lot of yellow in my reference. So right down in here I see a lot of yellow. I may switch to some blue here in a minute. But this is my underpainting. I'm not worried about this corner. I'm going to do what's called vignetting, which is just kind of letting the corners fade out. I'm going to switch over to I'm going to go back to my green, but I'm going to add a little bit more ultramarine blue into it, so it's not really green and it's not really blue. It's kind of a middle tone color. And I'm going to underpaint all the rest of the leaves. I can start here. If it blends in with that yellow that I have, not going to worry about it. It's going to get painted over anyway. Come back here, make sure that I know where all my green spots are. Painting around the petal of the flower, so that would be negative painting. When I see something I missed when I was transferring this on, I missed part of the stem here, so I'm just going to take my pencil, just draw it in. No harm, no foul. I'm going to paint right over it anyway with this light blue-green. There's a lot of water in this. Just painting around. Got to be careful, that's part of a leaf there. Or a petal right through there, and then this is the leaf behind it. Sometimes a photograph can be rather confusing. Even real life can be rather confusing when you're looking at it. Paint what you see. Don't just start in and start painting. Really look at what you're painting before you start in. It's mostly, at this point, it's just shapes. It's nothing other than shapes. This is where your drawing skills kick in. I added just a touch more blue to that and some more water. Now that's a little stronger than I want it, so I just rinsed my brush, and this is just water on my brush to just move what I put down around. Okay, I think that, let me just double check. Nope, one more little spot right here. Space between petals. Let me get my head out of the way. Space between petals right there. And that is our underpainting. Again, I've got to let it dry. But I think before we start again, I'm going to at least start some of the darker background on this. So if it looks a little different when I come back, that's all I've done, but I will show you how I did that. So hang in there, I'll be back in a minute. Okay, we're back. What I've done here is I have gone over this area here with another layer of paint. This time it was a mix of my ultramarine blue and Hooker's green. Hooker's green's just a slightly bluer green than the sap green. I wanted to show you something. This wash and this wash are the same value, but because watercolor is transparent, like I said before, each layer that you put on, the previous layer will influence it. So I did this little test here. These two are virtually the same value, but when I put another layer of paint on, they become darker. That's because of the layering effect of watercolor. And you want to make sure that you let watercolor dry between layers, otherwise all you're doing is mixing the paint on your paper. So let things dry thoroughly before you add another layer on. So today what I want to do is come in and add some shadows into my flower here. So if you look, we've got full petals in shadow. But you have to remember one thing about a photograph, that the photograph is lying to you. Cameras have their limitations, printers have their limitations. Your cameras have a filter in them called a UV blocker, which blocks the UV light. If you were to see this in person, these shadows would look more lavender or blue. Cameras, they turn them all to gray. To make them look more alive or lively, we as artists have to take and interpret our subject matter and remember what we see in nature, which is always a good thing to do when you're out. Look at things. You'll hear me say that a lot. Look at what you are seeing in nature. Look at shadows. Look at sunlit areas. Look at those in-between areas. Make notes, either mental or physical. And then compare what you see to a photograph. And you'll start to see the difference there. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to mix up a light lavender color. Now that's going to be my ultramarine blue and a little touch of alizarin crimson. I just want it to be a little bit on the purple side. And water is what we use to make things lighter. The thinner your paints are, and that means that there's more water to pigment, then the lighter they will look. So I've mixed up a light color, and I'm just going to use this to test my color. Okay, I think I'm going a little more red in it, or the crimson. Okay, that's a good color right there. So now I'm looking at my photograph, and I'm going to just start painting things that have got mostly the lavender. Paint things one at a time. You can always make something darker. It's harder to make it lighter. So I'm just going to come in and I will do some more around that in the background here too. A lot of things, once you get your painting started and you have areas that are wet and drying and other areas that are dry that you can paint, it makes life a little bit easier because you can continue to paint and let one area dry while you paint another. Now this area right in here, I'm looking at my photograph and it goes from a shadowed to a light. So I'm just going to put the shadow color where I see it in my photograph. That's the important thing about having your reference in front of you. I'm going to rinse my brush, and I'm going to do what I did around the outside of my painting, and I'm just going to soften the edge of this. There should not be any real hard edges. Come here, start getting shadows started on under here. This is negative painting that yellow part. And look at shapes. The shape has got some ins and outs on it because it's a shadow from all the little, I think they're anthers, probably wrong. Now, as I'm talking, I see I did something. Don't panic. I'm just going to come in here and I'm just going to lift that out. Rinse my brush. When I make a mistake, I try to let my students see how I fix it. So that was just water that I put on there, and I'm just going to lift it out so that I have the shadow where I want it. Going to mix a little bit more color. It's my ultramarine blue and my alizarin crimson. Again, I'm not really concerned if it actually matches. Close enough. You know, I'm not a machine. You know, and as I said before, making things a little bit different actually makes them look a little more real. My eyes are constantly going back up to my reference photo that's out of frame here. Come over here, do this one. Move over a little bit. This one's kind of a fold over from this petal. This is the underside of it. Rinse my brush. I'm going to come in here and just soften this edge before I forget. Okay, this is now dry, so I don't need to worry too much about getting close to it. What will happen if this were drying and I hit it with wet paint, it would form a bloom. Sometimes the blooms are welcome, other times not so much. I'm just following what I see in my photograph up here. It's darker right underneath this fold. Rinse my brush and then bleed this out. Okay, now while those areas are drying, well, let's see if I can do this one. Yeah, I can do this one. And actually I'm going to switch to my 1/2 inch angled shader or angle brush. Pick up some more of that lavender. right in here. I kind of missed a spot, but on my drawing, but that's okay. I'm just gonna wing it. Okay, this is this right in here. You know, if you make a, you know, like here, I didn't quite get this according to the photograph that I have, but I'm not going to worry about it. This flower changes from moment to moment. This is just one little moment I caught in time when I was out taking pictures. So if it's not exactly, you know, the way it is in the photograph, that's okay. Don't think that you're a Xerox machine. You know, you're not there to copy this, you're there to interpret. Okay, so now I'm going to go back and I'm going to add the blue around the rest of this. And then once I do that, I'm going to take a little break and make sure everything's good and dry before I continue on. So mix my blue, that's my ultramarine blue, with my Hooker's green and water. I would rather do layers than to try and go to the finished color, because it just makes it easier to control. So I'm going to pull that out just a little bit. I'm going to turn this so that I can get to it easier and my arm isn't in the way. And the darker that I get this background, just rinsing my brush and bleeding that out. Rinse and bleed. But the darker I get that background, the whiter the poppy will look. That's contrast, dark against light. As a painter, you want to find those areas where you can use contrast. The contrast between light against dark, or dark against light. And that brings interest to your painting. When I was taking classes like I now teach, I always like to find a good light source in the whatever it was I was painting, and then almost overemphasize it. And so I'd have a very strong source of light with some dark shadows. My teacher came up behind me and she watched me for a while, and I was wondering what she was thinking, because I wasn't doing what everybody else was doing. Finally, she just looked at me and she said, "You really like the drama, don't you?" And yes, I do. You know, having that contrast between light and dark, between colors. And I do like color too. I have to sometimes be a little careful of doing too much color, but you know, I enjoy that type of thing. You know, that's the way I want to paint. You know, it's not how everybody wants to paint, and that's fine. This is just water on my brush. I'm rinsing my brush and then bleeding it out. But a lot of people, you know, everybody has a different way, a different method. Every teacher that you ever take a class from or take a workshop from, they have their own methods and their own ways. Is it right? Is it wrong? No, they just have what works for them. And you need to keep that in mind when you are taking classes. You know, they have something they've been doing for a lot of years. I've probably been painting watercolors for over 40 years now. So I'm kind of stuck in my ways. And I'm sure that the other teachers, they have things that work for them. You know, it's not right, it's not wrong, it's just how we work. Turn it again. I think this is part that I've already gone over once, but it's going to get another couple coats anyhow. Well, like I said, I may not show you everything that I'm doing in this video, but I will show you what I am doing to get to where this will end. Okay, so there we have the beginnings of our shadows in our petals. We've got the background going pretty good. So I think I'm going to give it just a little break, and we'll be back in a second.